All right, YouTubes, today I want to talk to you about one of my preferred strategies for dieting, intermittent fasting. And I want to stop right there and just say that there's nothing magical about intermittent fasting. I like getting hyped about the next great idea just as much as the other person, and it's kind of hard to sell something that works by just being like, all right, there's nothing special about this, just do it. But it really, like, intermittent fasting is as simple as that. Don't get hung up on the word fasting, because it's not about that at all. What is it? Well, it's basically when you shorten your feeding window during the day. We're not doing a whole day fast or multiple day fast or anything like that. Chances are you probably eat very close to an optimal intermittent fasting window to begin with. There's different types. So there's a 16-8 and a 24. And what that means is that on a 16-8, you'll be essentially not eating for 16 hours, and then you'll have an 8-hour feeding window. Same thing with the 24, 20 hours of not eating and 4-hour feeding window. What I recommend for most is the 8-hour feeding window. And you'd be looking at basically having your first meal, let's say at 10 a.m. and your last meal at 6 p.m. or your first meal at 12 p.m. and your last meal at 8 p.m. And if you really stop and think for a second, chances are you probably have, most people have, I would say, like a 10, 11-hour feeding window anyway. So it's literally just a matter of holding out for that first meal of the day for a couple of hours. Now, there are some theories out there that there can be a change in gene expression, there can be some health benefits to intermittent fasting, but there's not enough evidence out there in the research yet to prove anything like that. So as far as I'm concerned, what this dieting strategy does is it gives you a smaller window of time to eat, and what that can do is it can lead to you just being more satiated during that smaller feeding window and keeping more full and just winding up not eating as much because you have less time to eat. Now, here's where it gets a little hairy. If you have a 4-hour feeding window, you might think to yourself, well, if I, more is better, right? If I have 8 hours to eat, what if I only give myself 4 hours to eat? I'm not gonna overeat, right? I'm telling you right now, like, that right there is risky for most people because it can lead to disordered eating behaviors. It can lead to bulk eating, and especially if we've had these issues in the past or there's things that we're looking to overcome, this can be problematic, or sometimes it can actually cause it. And believe it or not, if you don't eat for 20 hours and you have those 4 hours to cram all the food in that you possibly can, you're probably gonna go for the hyper-palatable, calorically dense food, and you could easily rack up several thousand more calories than you had intended on eating for the day. So the 16-8 approach, in my opinion, is far more sensible. Now, I would say one of the biggest questions we get with this thing is like, well, I like to train in the morning, I can't do it. For those that like to eat something before they train, which, by the way, I always, for the record, suggest eating something before we train. Some people can get away with training fasted, but personally, I prefer some energy in the tank before we get to the gym. Doesn't have to be a lot, but we have to have something. So what I recommend for those who want to do this 8-hour feeding window, but they train super early in the morning because they have to or they choose to, is have a large meal before you go to bed. Maybe have like 30% of your carbohydrates for the day before you go to bed. Just have a big meal before you go to sleep. And when you wake up, you'll still have some of that energy to use fresh in the system. And have something small. Like I said, there's no hard and fast rules here. The idea isn't like, well, if we're outside the 8-hour feeding window eating something, it's ruined, the whole thing is crap. My suggestion is having like a banana or half a banana and a protein shake before you train early in the morning. And then, rather than having to have your meal immediately when you're done training, wait an hour or two, and now you're still having your first meal of the day at, say, 10 a.m. or noon time. So for those early morning trainers, that's what I recommend. One other thing I did want to make a mention of with the 4-hour feeding window, just strictly from a muscle building standpoint, is muscle protein synthesis. The studies show that we can stimulate muscle recovery and muscle building 3 to 5 times a day, essentially. And you need to space that out throughout the day. Now, in an 8-hour feeding window, if we're having, say 3 to 4 meals, like a meal every 2 to 3 hours, for example, then we're good. We're telling our body that we need to stimulate muscle protein synthesis multiple times a day. If we have a 4-hour feeding window, it's a little harder to do that. Now, I will say when we're newer to training, just playing devil's advocate here, it's not quite as important, but the more advanced we become, the more important meal timing becomes in regards to splitting up our protein throughout the day, which with an 8-hour feeding window, we can do that. I mean, I've seen one person be able to pull off the eat dinner and then do not eat the rest of the day, and believe it or not, they were able to get like a massive amount of food in because they needed to. I mean, they had a very fast metabolism, and they would get in like 6,000 calories in one meal, but that is the exception to the rule. And like I said, that can lead to disordered eating behavior in the future. So I do not suggest it. And I've seen it time and time again fail for people, or just lead to other issues. So 8-hour feeding window, nothing special about it. Break up your protein throughout the day. Just to recap, if you train in the morning, have something small and have a large meal at night. And that's pretty much it. And doing it this way should result in the ability to adhere to our caloric budget for the day, because we'll wind up being more satiated. All right, thanks so much for tuning in. If you liked the video, hit the like button, and we'll look forward to... I need like a script. All right, so I was specifically told by Danny while I was recording right now to not say to smash that like button or I will be getting divorced. So go ahead and smash that like button, all right? And I'll handle that. All right, if you like the video, hit the like button, and we'll see you on the next one.